Alrighty, so set of dies. So these are RCBS dies, and they come with your two die set inside. The die we're dealing with is the guy with the pointy bit at the end for your decapping, your depriming, and that's what it looks like. So that's what we're going to use. Now also in the same box you'll get instructions. Funny enough, if you actually follow the instructions, it'll take you through all the steps that we're going to visually do now. But who reads instructions? So that's there for emergencies. So that's the die we're dealing with. Okay. Alrighty, the other thing you'll need is a shell case holder. This is a number 5. That simply pops in to that guy there. I'm going to spin it that way so it's easy for me to throw brass in and out. Alright, so that's that done. Now you will have the die that you're using has got this pin sticking out the bottom. Now when I pulled this out of the box, this pin here was twice as long as you see it there. So in order to adjust that, so the adjustment I need is 4.78 millimeters, required me to take that locking nut off right there, spin that back. You can then turn that short, long, lefty, loosey, righty, tighty, etc, etc. And then once I had it set with the verniers at 4.78, I put the locking nut back on to there, locked it, rechecked it with the verniers, 4.78, happy with that. So that's the die setup. Now, brand new dies, sometimes you do need to check them, check inside. They're not rocket science things. You can basically just unscrew this, it all sort of pulls apart. And if you want to use some degrease it, go ahead and do so. And that way you know there's nothing in there. So that's all that part there. So that's the die ready to go. So now we want to put the die into the press. So we simply get it started. So thread start, run that locking nut all the way up. Now we want to run your handle down and bring the ram all the way to the top until it bottoms out. Okay, and then we're going to run that die down until we touch and it bottoms out, which is there. Okay, so bring the arm up, run the ram down a bit, give it a smidge, and then we want to run that locking nut down so it doesn't go anywhere further. Okay, so that is where we want to be. Okay, there are other ways of setting up a die, but for a beginner this is the simplest, and as per most manufacturers that make dies, this is how most of them will suggest that you set up. But there are other ways, but we'll get into that in level 2 reloading. All right, so that's your die set up, and we're ready to put brass through. Okay, so once you've got your locking nut on your die set, see that little brass bit there? You whack a little Allen key in there and you lock that in. That way you don't have to go through this process every time, then that screws the whole unit out once it's locked in. Okay, so go ahead and do that. Alrighty, so we're about to do a piece of brass. So that's our once fired piece of brass, and we need to put some lube on it. And you can get all different types of case lube. I'm just going to use something I found in the cupboard. I've got a head, a little bit on the finger. You can get little mats. I actually usually make up a spray with lanolin, straight off the sheep's back literally, and alcohol, and I make that into a spray, and I just usually spray that all over. I usually do about 50 rounds at a time, so I usually spray that over 50 rounds and I just whack through them. So that's done by hand. We put that into the case holder, which is there. Make sure it's in nice and properly. Always be checking your brass for particularly cracks in the neck. Once fired Hornady brass, I've never come across that, but always be checking your brass at each stage. Always keep an eye on your brass. The last thing you want is a bit of cracked neck and a reloaded piece of brass, and yeah, that'll create problems for you. And then just nice and easy on the arm, bring that ram all the way home, and you see how that just, I don't know if you saw that pop out then, but that little primer just popped out. Then bring it up gently, and then gets your brass deprimed. Okay, now when you get into long range tactical shooting, or we talk about bump a lot, we won't go through that here. For all intents and purposes, we simply want to put powder, projectile and primer back into used brass and make a bullet and make sure that it fires and it goes in the gun, etc, etc. So that's what we're interested in. So there's a lot to each stage, but these are the basics. If you get yourself up to speed with that, then just go through your shells. I've got about 20 in that box. I'll go through those now and get all those deprimed for our next session. Okay,